Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming and listening. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Good afternoon. I'm so excited to be here and share this with you. Adoption is a thing that I enjoy talking about because just modernizing your environment to improve your BI is always a good thing, and Power BI is a good way to do that using Power BI. So what I'm going to talk about today is how to adopt Power BI with strategy using a framework in your organization. So I'm going to turn my camera off because I make weird faces when I speak. But if you have any questions, as Deborah said, just please put them in the chat. And every now and then I'll stop for questions, and that's when I'll handle those. And at the end, you can put any question, and we'll have a moment at the end of the session to just go through those. Okay, so as I said before, this is a session on Power BI Adoption Framework. I'm DENISHA MALONE. You can follow me on Twitter, and also go to my blog and see some short videos. If you're new to Power BI, or if you've been doing Power BI for a little while, then you can choose the level of knowledge you are and find some how-tos for specific things. So before I hop right in, just a little bit about me and my history in Power BI. I graduated with a bachelor's in business information technology. I'm from Tennessee. And I started with Power BI before it was generally available to the public. So I started it in 2015 during an internship. And ever since then, I stuck with it because I really understood it and I really enjoy helping others understand it. So what is an adoption framework? Why should you use an adoption framework? An adoption strategy is when you identify roles, responsibilities, and best practices to help users understand and use a new product. Regarding BI, in my past, dealing with customers and clients, a lot of common challenges that I've faced when working with them to adopt Power BI has been the general usage. So that's things based around licensing. So who gets a license and who doesn't? What comes with a free license versus a pro versus a premium? User adoption is another general usage challenge, and that can be how to create a center of excellence for internal discussion with users, where they can do things like post policies, ask and answer questions, and share knowledge. Another common challenge is based around governance, and those are usually questions around user management and analytics, policy control, tenant administration, and resource monitoring. Data management can also be a challenge when adopting BI, and those challenges can come around data quality, so how good the data is and how well it's being accessed by your users. Common data models, or better known as CDM, and common data models are common tables that are used across your organization. Those tables can be using the same data in different ways. And if you identify and strategize how you're using those tables, you can reduce the resource usage from your Power BI reports that's using that same data. And the last common challenge, which has been lately the more important one, is security. And most times this is the biggest challenge, and it's also the most important. And customers can ask questions around Active Directory user groups and also data access and sharing. Okay, clicking too many times. Okay, before you roll out a new application, you want to first identify your adoption roles. So here is where you'll define the responsibilities that's going to take to actually have a successful environment in BI. And this is in any BI environment. So Power BI, Oracle, reporting, SQL Server reporting, any kind of BI that you want to do. Figuring out these responsibilities is a good first step. The first level are consumers. This is most of the time this has the biggest user count because a lot of these users will not be creating anything. They'll just be making decisions from content that's created by developers, power users, and analysts. And analysts is the next level. These users are going to view and edit content that has been created by the BI team, the power users, and other analysts. Power users are another level up. They create and publish content to be used by a project team or an entire department. The BI development team will develop approved enterprise-wide content and products. They'll create data models, reports, applications, and also put together insights for people throughout the business to consume. So that's more of a team of power users, really. The web development team, a lot of companies already have a web development team, but it's always good to include a BI person on that team that focuses more on developing internal and external applications, embedding Power BI into web solutions. IT operations is a team that could include the BI development team and the web development team, but the IT operations team is responsible for making sure that day-to-day operations are smooth, they resolve any urgent issues, and they also configure the Power BI settings, which is really important because when you start Power BI and you begin to roll it out, Microsoft gives you the default settings, and a lot of times those default settings don't go hand in hand with what you as an organization are looking to have in your BI environment. So you want to make sure those settings align with your core values of your company. And the last responsibility here is the IT minor enhancements and support. A lot of times, this is what I see missing from customers, and most times those customers just depend on Microsoft for their support, which is okay. But if you have a large company, then this can just be really washed over. You want to make sure that you have your own internal minor enhancements and support, because a lot of times the questions that come in from users, consumers, analysts, power users, everyone above, you can have someone in the company to fix those minor problems. So you're not always creating support tickets for Microsoft. And this team, like I said, just supports the enterprise content and products. They maintain solutions. They make minor enhancements. They can also solve complex issues based, I guess, depending on the level of knowledge of that team. They monitor usage, which is also important in a BI environment. And they also monitor the performance of the tenant. And this is important if you're using a premium environment that has capacity, which you're paying for. You're paying for good performance. Okay, so now that you know your responsibilities, you're ready to adopt Power BI. You've made the decision that Power BI is good for your company, and now it's time to take the steps to actually adopt it into your organization. So this is what I've come up with. This is a 3-week plan. It could be longer, it could be shorter, depending on the stakeholder strategy. So depending on your data strategy, you could have longer workshops, and you could include time to actually develop your monitoring and support platforms before you roll it out. So depending on what your strategy is, this could be longer than 3 weeks, but 3 weeks is my minimum idea of what this will look like. So the first thing you want to do when adopting Power BI new into your organization, you've never had it before, the first thing you want to do is have a workshop with the IT stakeholders. Some example attendees in this meeting would be the CTO, maybe, the IT manager, the director of BI, the director of data strategy. You just want to have those high-level decision makers as a part of this meeting, so you can determine what your actual strategy is. In this meeting, you'll be reviewing that strategy, and how it's going to include Power BI. You want to identify who does what based on those 7 responsibilities we just reviewed. You want to also, in this meeting, review and customize any workshop content, which later in this session, I'll show you what those workshops will actually look like. But once you start to share knowledge with those user groups, you're gonna actually have workshops to teach them things in Power BI. And before those workshops start, you want to make sure the stakeholders understand what content is in that workshop, and sometimes they would switch that content up or decide to add or remove things. So you want to make sure that you review and customize that content here in this meeting. And then you want to also discuss any risk, which is important because things could go wrong. And so we want to know what the stakeholders, what kind of decision, what kind of direction the stakeholders will go in if things went wrong. So once you've met with the stakeholders, your next step is to actually go do workshop planning. So during your workshop planning, you're just going to document any changes that happen when discussing with the stakeholders. So you want to document and customize your adoption strategy, which could be different for every company. You want to outline the workshops, so get those workshops planned, send your invites to those responsibility, all of those users that fit each responsibility. You want to actually invite user groups to the workshops. And this really doesn't include a lot of people doing the planning. It's just whoever's managing the rollout of Power BI. You can hire a consultant to do this, or you can do this within the company, but this planning is just whoever's managing that rollout. Then you want to follow up with the IT stakeholders just to review the plan, and this could be a really short email. This doesn't take a long time either. This is just where you will update the stakeholders of the rollout plan that you created during your planning and get approval. Once that's approved, you're going to go right into your workshops. There are 4 different categories that we'll talk about in a bit. And because IT people, based on my experience, you don't want to keep IT people, like tech users, tech developers, or anyone in the tech industry really in a full day workshop. Is really not favored. Sometimes it works for companies, but a lot of times that just doesn't work. So I would suggest doing a half-day workshop, and it does take a whole day to cover one topic. So that's why it's 4 topics. If you split one topic into 2 days, then you have 8 half-day workshops. So you're either going to do 8 half-day workshops or 4 whole-day workshops, and whatever works for your company. But this is a time where you do those workshops, and you will also, during those workshops, you'll actually customize your rollout plan based on the needs of the organization. So what this means is that while you're sharing the knowledge to those user groups, sometimes they will have insight on how different ways to roll out certain things. And once I talk through the workshops, you'll kind of understand what I'm saying a little better. But during that time, you just want to make sure that it's really a open conversation with the people who are in there in those workshops to better roll out Power BI based on everyone's strategy and thoughts. So once you have the workshops done, the next thing you're going to do, you're going to go back. Within your own little group, not including the users, and create, just document and plan a strategy. This could just be you, and could be a BI development team if you have that already. This is just where you would use. Microsoft has strategy documentation in their framework GitHub. There's a framework GitHub that Microsoft has that has all of this information for the workshops, and they have their own strategy documentation that you could use, or you can create your own documentation based on your feedback from the user groups. But this is just where you'll create that strategy. You'll then share the documentation with the leaders of those user groups, so the IT leads. And after the workshops, it is common that the rollout plan could change. So during this time, you'll also realign with the stakeholders from the beginning, just to make sure that they're aware of any changes that happen during the workshops to that strategy that you discussed. And then you prepare for your phased rollout. Once your strategy is documented and you are realigned with the stakeholders, the next thing you'll do is create a center of excellence. This center of excellence is a really great strategy tip for an organization that's never had kind of a community within departments, or even just organizational wide. And this center of excellence can be a place inside teams. It could be in SharePoint. It can be in Slack, whatever works for your company. It's just going to be a place where all the users, regardless of their responsibility, can go and get information about Power BI and how your organization is using it. It's going to be a place where they can go and ask questions, where they can get answers, they can review any policies. Maybe you want to share the strategy with everyone. This is where you will post that strategy. And also where they'll just get general knowledge of the tool. Once that center of excellence is created, you're going to start your phased rollout. Now, there's two types of rollouts. There's a phased rollout and there's an organizational-wide rollout. It's recommended to do a phased rollout, which you'll hear me say a lot more than the latter. And the only reason I recommend this is because Power BI, you have to monitor the usage of Power BI to make sure that you have enough licensing, you have enough capacity, and your users are actually consuming the tool as you like. And a phased rollout will allow for you to monitor at a high level a lot better, so you're able to assign and buy capacity if needed. Okay, I'm going to pause here for any questions.
I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but please remember, if you have any, please drop them in the chat. We'll ask. But this 3-week plan, it looks great, actually. This is really, looks really great.
Thank you. Okay, so there's another. So this is when you have Power BI already. You're already using Power BI, maybe not as much, but if you have Microsoft licensing, then technically you already have Power BI. But a lot of times organizations never touch it. But in this case, this is if maybe you have one department that's using it, or you have a few people here and there that's creating reports and sharing. But there's really no strategy. There's never been a strategy of how you actually want to use Power BI. So this is my 2-week ReAdoption Plan, is what I would call it, because you never really adopted, you never really had a strategy in the first place. So this is when you're interested in better administration. Maybe you want to actually monitor, and it could be just that you just want more users to use it. So this is when you would use this plan. I put it as 2 weeks only because a lot of the content in the workshops is beginner friendly, and if you're already using Power BI, you probably already have some of that knowledge in your organization. So some of those workshops will be cut short. So the first thing you want to do is to review the Power BI environment. And this is going to be with stakeholders, just like before. But in this meeting, you may include the Power BI administrator, which you may or may not have. But if you don't have it, this would be a good time to figure out who that would be, because you're going to need a Power BI administrator. And if you have Power BI Premium, then you're going to need a capacity administrator. And that person can be the same person, or it could be different, but you want to determine who that is and what that looks like. In this meeting, you also are going to include the manager of IT, the CTO, maybe. I know the C-suite is a lot. They're really busy, but this is a good time to include really high-level business decision makers. During this time, you're going to define or update if you already have it, documentation of those 7 responsibilities. So you want to make sure that, you could have had those already, but a lot of times, if you've never had a strategy of Power BI or BI in your environment, you could be missing some of those responsibilities. So you want to make sure that you know who is going to be doing what during this meeting. You want to review and customize your workshop content just as before. So show those stakeholders what the workshops are going to look like and, just tweak it based on the needs of the organization. And then you're going to discuss any risks. You want to make sure I will put an asterisk on that if you're taking notes, because that's really important to discuss risk, because things go wrong. That's just really life. So you want to make sure that they may not go wrong, which is that's a good life. But you want to make sure you have those possibilities out there. So those what ifs, just to get, some risk management going. So once you've reviewed the environment and you know what your plan is going to look like, you want to go and actually document that plan and customize it and follow it with the stakeholders. This is when you'll outline the workshops too, and also invite those user groups so everyone has the meeting on their calendar for their own workshop. Then you're going to just go right into the workshops. Because this plan is a ReAdoption plan, I put 4 half-day workshops, so you're only speaking a half a day on each topic. But based on your conversation with the stakeholders, one topic could be, could maybe need more, more focus. So instead of one half day, you may spend 2 days on one topic. So this plan could be longer, really depending on what your organization needs when it comes to readopting Power BI. But once you've done the workshops, you're going to then, just like before, go into documentation and strategy planning. And same as before, you can use the Microsoft provided documentation, where it's just it's kind of like a fill in the blank sheet where you go through and you fill in everything based on the workshop feedback and create a strategy. And then you want to also just share that documentation with the leaders from before and make sure everyone's on one accord. Next, you want to actually create or update, because you may already have some kind of center of excellence that maybe no one's using, or maybe someone's created a Slack channel or a Slack, environment that's already there. But at this time, you want to update that and add everyone who should be in it, or create it if you've never had one before. At this time, you want to engage those power users for sure, and those consumers in this environment, so they know that it exists and there's actual stuff there that's useful for them. And then you want to just roll out the plan. As I mentioned before, you want a phased plan. So what that looks like is, if you have 5 departments, and a lot of times customers will maybe start with the sales department or the finance department, you will just roll Power BI out to one group at a time to see how they consume it. And maybe you need to tweak the settings, maybe you need to have more security. But that phased rollout just allows for you to figure out what works without rolling it out to everyone and finding problems. So it's really a form of risk management. Okay, I'm going to pause here for any more questions. Any questions?
I don't see any questions, but I will point out that I noticed someone posted on Twitter how they're really enjoying the rollout phases, and also really like the idea of center of excellence, which actually is really cool. I like that idea as well, and kind of the thinking about the phased rollouts, and so you can adjust as you go through the steps and figure out what you need. Yes. So these are really great plans.
Thank you. And thanks for my tweet. Thanks for whoever tweeted.
I think that was Chris Voss, by the way.
Oh, Chris. Hey, Chris. Okay. Well, thank you. And if you have questions, then post them. Okay. So now we have, this is the only kinds of strategies you can have, either an adoption strategy, for if you've never used Power BI, or a readoption strategy for if you've been using it but you want to get better. So now the big part of this session is the workshops. I'm gonna go through the workshops at a really high level. There's a lot to be done in these workshops, but I'm just gonna give you a really high level overview of what you would speak about in those workshops. And if you have any questions on anything specific, then you can ask me. But this is just gonna be a high level of what you can have in those workshops. And if you search Microsoft Adoption Framework GitHub, then you will be able to find Microsoft's GitHub that has some more detailed content for each workshop. And they also have a YouTube channel for their framework where you can actually share slides. So there's slides that you can actually share during that workshop, and you can tweak or change up however you like. So there's 4 workshops. There's governance, service management, security, rollout, and support. And based on the users that we mentioned, those responsibilities, whoever they are, based on their responsibility, that's what workshop they'll go to. So governance would be like the IT operations, more of the admin level people. Service management could be like the web development team, because service management, Power BI serves the online tool. So anyone who be managing that online tool, or anyone managing the online tool will come to this service management. Security would be a lot of the operations, and even the BI development team could be a part of the security workshop. And rollout and support would be some of the high level responsibility groups. And I would also include the leader, maybe a leader of just the general group. So someone who would manage just the consumers, or they will be a part of that rollout and support workshop. So the first workshop is governance. In the governance workshop, you're going to decide your actual rollout phases. So you're going to do phases because you heard in the session, in some session you went to, that's the best way to do it. And so here you're going to decide what those rollout phases will look like, what's going to happen first, second, third, fourth. You actually want to list each phase and decide how you're going to do that. You're going to customize your strategy for company culture. So at this point, you're going to already have your rollout strategy because you documented it and you've talked about it with the stakeholders. So while you're in this governance meeting with all of these admins, you want to review that strategy to make sure it aligns with governance and how the admins would look at things from their perspective. Want to make sure that your company culture matches the actual strategy. So just make sure everything's aligning with this group of admins, because everyone in this meeting is going to be an admin or a leader in some form. You want to determine any initial principles and goals. So what are your goals with Power BI? This is going to be a discussion. So it's not going to be one person just speaking and sharing information. It's going to be a discussion between everyone in the room to give their input and ideas and how they feel about certain topics. So when you're determining your principle and goals, you want to see how everyone is expecting to use Power BI and how they see it in the future for their own, environment or department or wherever they're coming from. You want to clarify ownership and business information content. This is important because sometimes you can, for instance, let me give you an example. You have an organization and you have a SQL server, you have an Oracle server, and you have a SharePoint online that has all these Excel files. You want to know who owns, you want to make sure you clarify who's the DBA of each server, who owns the data files in SharePoint, who to contact to get more access to certain information. This is the time where you discuss that, and you have to document it so you don't have to scramble around later down the line to figure out how to get access to something, or if something breaks or there's a failure, then who to reach out to fix. This is where you determine who that person is. In the governance workshop, you'll also define who has access to see and request content, which is just a simple conversation of data access. So who can access what and how, what's the request process, what the request process looks like. Sometimes you don't have a request process. It's just an email to say, can I get access to this data? And that is not, that's not ideal. That's not a best practice. You want to make sure you have some kind of request process, approval process that's documented and can be backtracked at any time. And that a good way to do that is using Microsoft Flow, just really anything that works for you, but I've used Flow in the past, just so when someone puts in a request, then it goes to the proper people's email. You can approve it through email, and everything is documented. But you want to make sure you have some kind of process that users can request certain things. Maybe you want to request a license for Power BI. Those kind of things, you want to make sure that that's documented and there's a proper approval process for that. In this workshop, you want to make sure that it's understood that with Power BI, the goal is to have a balanced centralized control. So Power BI is a self-service tool, but just because it's self-service doesn't mean that everybody's just gonna do whatever they want to do. That's kind of self-service. That's kind of what self-service is, but in the center is going to be control. You want to make sure you control it at the center, so you know what's going on, you know what's happening, you're monitoring the usage. But there's a decentralized empowerment, so all the users feel empowered. The developers feel like they can do whatever they want to do. They can access whatever data they want. But in reality, you have control over who's accessing what, who's sharing to what environment. So you want to make sure that that's understood in this governance meeting, that even though Power BI is self-service, we still want to be able to control it at a central level. And this quote comes from the Microsoft team directly, and they say, discipline at the core, flexibility at the edge, which is perfectly what I'm trying to say. So that's a great way to look at Power BI and how you want to adopt it and the way you want it to be seen and used in your organization. The next workshop is service management, and here you would talk about directory and account management, subscriptions and licensing. So what is a license and who gets one and how much it costs, all of that. You're going to talk about creating groups and organizational apps, enterprise IT management and usage, monitoring, which is important, especially during the phase rollout. You want to make sure you monitor how things are being used and what kind of monitoring you're going to do. You want to talk about that in this meeting. If you're going to use an API to show, which is what I prefer, to show how users are interacting with Power BI. Are they publishing? Are they getting data or exporting to Excel? Which, if that's happening a lot, you want to make sure you know. And then just review the administration portal here and go through those tenant settings and change them up how you want them to be. The third workshop is security, which I mentioned. This is one of the ones that's really important, and a lot of questions come from security. And so in the security workshop, you're going to talk about data location. So where your data is going to be. Is it going to be on premise? Is it going to be in the cloud? Or where is it already? And if it's on premise, a lot of times customers have on-premise data and they're in the process of moving to the cloud. So you just want to have that conversation in this security group. You want to talk about data access. So RLS, row level security, are you going to have it? Who's gonna manage that? Is it going to be more of security trimming, which is security trimming is like row level security on the database level. So that's where someone can access only certain data in the database, instead of row level security is like a Power BI level security where you can access only certain data in Power BI. So talk about that, and also common data models. So if finance is using the same data that marketing's using, or marketing is using the same data as sales. They're using, similar data tables. You want to talk about what tables those are, and if you can maybe create some common data models that they all can access at one place, instead of everyone pulling in their own data into a report. Maybe create a data flow. Just figure out the best way for users to access that data for the best performance. And then you want to also discuss data sharing, which is very important. All of this is important, but data sharing is based around workspaces versus apps. So what are you going to use? If you're going to have capacity, then premium capacity, then you're going to have apps. And you just want to make sure the security group knows what those are and the difference between each. Talk about security groups, which you want to have security groups. It's the easiest way to manage users, user roles and user permissions is using security groups. So this is a good place to create some, and especially for your first phase, just as a test, and set up those permissions for those groups. And then talk about public versus internal sharing. A lot of times you may not want public sharing, but Power BI allows for some users to share with external emails, and you want to make sure that if you're going to allow that, then that's fine. But if you're not going to allow it, then you want to discuss removing that option from the tenant, and figuring out if that's something that you want, and internal sharing, what that looks like. So just have that discussion here in the security group. And the last workshop is the Rollout and Support workshop. This is the workshop that's really focused on the community, your organizational community, and you'll talk about the training needs. So you're probably going to need training for the different levels of roles for the rollout. So you want to talk about what that training will look like, where you're going to find that training, how long that training is going to last. You want to make sure that you align your training with your rollout. So you don't want to roll out to finance first and then train finance 3 months from now. Like, you want to make sure your training is aligned with your rollout planning. You want to implement a change management system. This is important, especially if you're going to have different users creating, different departments touching reports, or if you're going to have an organizational wide rollout, if you decide to go that route, then a change management process is really important, because anything can go wrong, and you want to make sure you can change things fast and be able to document what was changed. The Center of Excellence to create the user community. In this workshop, you're going to create that Center of Excellence in this workshop. You're going to determine where that's going to be. You're going to make sure everyone who attended the workshop is added successfully. You're going to start creating those different tabs and uploading documents. Like this is where that happens. And then you're going to discuss support and what kind of support you're going to have, where that support is going to come from. Just define and discuss those support centers. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward. And the rollout, again, just determine if you're going to do the recommended phase rollout or the organizational wide rollout. Which, if you have a small company, then you can do an organizational wide rollout because it's a small company. But if it's really larger than, if you have more than, I would say 15 to 20 licensing, pro licensing, if you plan to have more than that, which is still kind of small, then you may want to just do a phase rollout of like 5 licenses at a time, just to make sure that you understand your strategy. During this rollout, you want to do auditing, so you make sure that things are running smoothly, and just plan your capacity. And as I mentioned before, make sure your training is aligned with your rollout. And you want to communicate. So this is important because a lot of times companies will roll out a new tool and nobody knows until they log into the computer and they see an email, or that they have a license, or they see a new app on their computer. So you want to make sure that you communicate to your organization that there's a new app in town. We're doing this we're using this new tool. There's going to be training available. You want to make sure you communicate who has a license and what that means. So you have a license and this is what it means. You want to make sure you share any key contacts. So who they reach out to for access. If there's a request process, how they find that request process. You don't want your users to ask questions that you already know they're going to ask. You want to just give them those answers at the start. And then also give them some getting started documentation, because a lot of times, well, of course they can Google it, but if you can just provide them with those white papers or the how to install Power BI, how to use DAX, just be helpful, because it's always good to be helpful. Okay, and that is all. Are there any questions?
I don't see any questions, but this is a lot of great information. I love all the workshops that you have set up. The one question that I would put is, a lot of times when you're adopting new things, you need to get everyone on board with it. So if you had, like, I don't know if there's if evangelist is the right word, but what do you think about trying to, for how I love the different roles that you have, but where would that evangelist role fall into? How can we get people to not be scared of all this adoption? Because this is a lot of stuff that we're asking people to do, and I love how you're framing it to make it easier for people. But what would you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great I think that's a great role, and that would be a part of probably the support team, and they'll be in that rollout and support conversation, and they'll probably be heavy on the communicate. They'll probably be the one that's doing the communication, and could even be a sit-in in all the training, just to make sure, just to have that person there that everyone can ask questions to and feel comfortable. That evangelist is going to have to know a lot about everything. So they're probably gonna have to be in all the workshops, honestly, just to have a high level understanding of what's happening, and not really have a technical responsibility, because if they have a technical responsibility, then their mind probably kind of goes somewhere else. But I think that's a great idea, to have someone just with an understanding knowledge of everything, without really having to have a technical role.